Hello, everyone, and welcome to the C++/C# Open Office Hours night. And with that, let the problems begin.
Yes. Tonight we've watched Nelson fail at operating his computer. You can now entrust me to answer your programming questions. Once Visual Studio starts.
The sound of people frantically looking for their unquestioned button.
Let's all sit back and watch this Visual Studio take the other 15 minutes I was just talking about in the "It's okay, Nelson, we've been waiting 30 minutes for you" scenario. Just giving you a hard time, Nelson.
Just in case you didn't notice.
Would you like to offer your computer a cookie? Any sort of incentive to have it speed up?
How do you set up a VM? Please don't ask me that, because I'll probably end up just blowing it up. Although, to be fair, it's most likely the hard drive. I think the hard drive is going out, which is very depressing because I purchased it, like, what, a month ago, 2 months ago?
Yeah, so just get them to replace the darn thing.
Is that your pony drive?
No. No, I got it from Amazon. Because Jason recommended this external drive enclosure.
Is it a closure or is it the docking station thing?
It's the docking station thing.
Yeah, mine's working fantastic, thank you very much. Yeah, Drobos are awesome. No, it's not a Drobo, though. It's a what, StarTech?
I can't remember.
I think. It's right in front of you. What's wrong with you?
It's behind my monitors.
Oh.
Okay. So first, what we're going to be talking about is the error that we got on Monday. And unfortunately, it was entirely my fault. So let me go ahead and just really quickly code up the example that we had.
I love the irony that despite the fact that you're now in VS Pro, you still can't use ReSharper because you're doing C++.
Let's go make fun of Nelson's stunted coding due to lack of tooling. Okay, then I'm going to write a void display products method function that takes in a vector, and for auto I equals products dot begin I did not equal products dot end I plus plus p equals star I cout. Now this is very exciting for everybody to watch right now.
You're going to do see and ignore at the end.
No, that's for the file reading. Okay, so first, to save a product, we're just going to auto I equals products begin I does not equal products dot end I plus plus product p equals star I, and we're going to initialize our if stream fin. Open it up to products.text, and we're going to fin I want without, or stream, seriously, OF stream, p dot name new line, p dot notes new line, p dot price New line. Okay, so we have now saved the products. So let's go ahead and load the products up from our IF stream. So load products, IF stream fin open products text or auto. What am I doing? While now I'm going to code it like it was before, and then I'll show why things were problematic.
Oh, is this the extra thingamajig at the end?
Mm-hmm.
So there was some minor discussion of that on the forum, which I kind of took away until you did this your way, primarily to see how many people were mentioning it as an issue. Did people come up with a way of solving this themselves, anyone particularly?
And by the way, the problem is that we print it out to a file, but if we look at the file, we'll notice that a erroneous product is appearing. So we're loading in this vector from a file. You'll notice that there's an additional product at the end. Okay, the problem was me forgetting one of the attributes of how fin or IF streams work and how that's handled by the STL or the STD library. And what's going on here is that the EOF bit is actually something at the end of a stream. Meaning, although we have at this point, after this fin.ignore, we have consumed every character in the IF stream. It is now completely consumed. It doesn't know it yet because it hasn't tried to advance one more. So it is sitting at the end of the stream, but it hasn't been made aware that that is the end of the stream. As a result, this method returns false, which continues the while loop. And what happens then is we try to get line, and then get into a price. So what we do to fix this is instead of this code right here, we do this code. Okay, I'm totally going to forget. IF stream, traits, EOF. By doing that, now when I run the program, you'll notice that we only have the 4 proper products. So what the peek method does, the peek method tries to advance the stream one more character and then returns the character that was established from the stream. It then puts that character back in the buffer. So we're not actually consuming a character, although we are advancing the character stream by 1 when we invoke peek. And then IF stream : traits type : EOF. This method returns the EOF signifier for the end of that stream. Now, traits are a meta-programming feature requiring the use of templates and template specifications. So it's not necessarily important that you understand how this comes to be, but its funkiness that you see right here is actually a very important feature that we simply won't be able to cover right now because we haven't gotten into templates.
So it's one of those things for the moment, like writing a business letter or anything like that, where you've just got to there is a form. This is how you do this.
Yeah.
When you need to.
When you need to access the EOF signal or the EOF character, then you access it through this syntax, which again does look funky, but does have a purpose. So how's everybody? Does this make sense to everybody? At least what's going on here should make sense. We are attempting on every iteration of the while loop to move the file stream one more character forward, and then we're putting it back. And if that character immediately after where we're pointing at is an EOF character, then we end the while loop.
There's a somewhat conceptual question related to this, which is these are the sort of things which are very easy to slip by and become bugs. These sort of, oh, it's doing it one more time than you expected it to,
Right.
sort of problems, or one time too few, or such and such. And there's a conceptual question about when you're debugging things, coming up with these edge cases to check for in the first, sort of knowing what to look out for.
Yeah.
Is that just literally other? I mean, obviously you pick it up with experience, and over time you start to recognise things that have gone before. But generally, if you it's a question of what am I trying to ask? How do you come up with which tests to run? If you see what I mean.
Well, what I did was, the first thing I did
to find these bugs, I suppose.
Well, the first thing I did was I nuked the new line right here, and kept in the ignore, and that indicated to me that there's one more thing in the future. The second thing that I did was instead of ignore, I did ignore 2 to prove that. And by doing ignore 2, we're ignoring 2 characters. And when you run it, you will get the proper behavior because you're ignoring 2 characters in the stream. So then I realized that, well, wait a sec, there is an additional character being at the end of the stream, which I had forgotten about because about 99.9% of all serialization or all file input-output that I've ever done in C was binary. Because typically when you're writing something in C++, you are looking for more performance and compactness than if you're writing in C#.
Yeah.
So I generally have avoided text files. So I completely forgot that the EOF bit doesn't make intuitive sense. And then I just looked up in the documentation and found that, yes, indeed, the EOF character does appear afterwards. So then I said, well, I know that there's a peek method, so let's go ahead and use this peek method. And then I Googled around and found where the EOF trait was being added to. Although I could have just as easily found it by doing ifstream : trait types, and that would have told me where. This bit, finding this, probably wasn't the only non-obvious thing, and that's just because I know what traits are and how C++ kind of deals with them.
Yeah. Wolf Knight, the EOF is end of file.
Right, so basically,
somebody's put it there. If
you have a file that has hello world, in C++, when you read it in, there'll be a byte or an additional invisible character in the stream that gets printed. Let's just call it EOF. So we need to find this character in order to determine if we're at the end of the stream. Now, if the file pointer is currently at this, is currently sitting on EOF, then the EOF method still returns false. The EOF method will only return true when the file pointer is past the EOF signal, which is why we have to peek forward once.
It's kind of like that, but for files. New line's the end of a line, and EOF is the end of the file. There's no more file.
And if you think about it, it does make sense. If you think about streams, the way streams work, a stream doesn't know that it's ended until it's read enough information to determine that it's been ended. I just made an incorrect assumption due to lack of experience on the EOF method.
If you're having trouble getting your head around this concept, I seem to recall somewhere, I'll go and look on the site, there was a video, although I think it was in C# about creating buffer streams. I think it was on the How to Make Your Own MP3 Player videos that Logan did, where he sets up the traditional example of a finite length stream buffer that loops,
yeah,
that cycles. I'll dig it out in the break from somebody to remind me.
All right.
if anyone's interested.
Well, typically what you can do is you can say, okay, most stream writing functions, and this is true for C, C++, and C Sharp, and probably Java, is you say, okay, I want to read in 1 kilobyte of data into my buffer, and then that method will return how many bytes were actually read in. So if there's a discrepancy, you know that you're at the end of the file, or the end of the stream. Not necessarily the end, you just know that no more data is being provided.
Right.
The bug that I was getting was that my while loop was incrementing 1 too many times. So if I run this with the bugged code and take this and put it back into 1, you'll notice at the end I have an additional... Wow. What? Did I just move my console window into nothing?
Did you? I think you closed it.
No, it's stuck. It's in nowhere. Wow. Great job, Windows. Okay, so you'll notice at the end of this file, there's an additional product because the while loop had looped over 1 too many times, and that's because that the EOF method doesn't work the way that I had incorrectly assumed it did. So hopefully that's a satisfactory explanation for everyone as to why I have
Seems
a
very
complete
clear.
failure at programming.
It also, well, no, it's good to see that. That's why I kind of pushed you on how you came to the resolution of it, because let's face it, most of programming is about solving problems that have happened.
Which is mostly due to
you
making
kind of making assumptions. Yeah.
making incorrect assumptions is typically the largest cause of all programming errors.
I'm going to go back to making every post on the site that I make just say RTM. Read the manual.
Okay, so we do have some questions. Let's talk about questions. Someone has a question. I'm going to open up. They linked me to the question, which is actually kind of a pain, but I won't. Okay. Let's see. I'm confused about the last requirement. Is the hint for the first option the static class or the second option the engine class, or a combination of the both? If we're doing the second option, why wouldn't we want the class to be... We wouldn't want to be the class static, right? Yeah, basically... basically, what this is about is I would prefer people avoid static classes for... Well, at first for all types. But there are obviously cases where static classes are appropriate, not only as far as being appropriate, but would be a preferable design. Although when you're talking about an object like an engine or a state manager, creating those and having those be static really reduces the amount of future expansion that you have with your program. Because now you are locked to only using a single state manager, for example, because it's a static. Even if it was a singleton and it was an instance class and you wanted multiple state managers, it would still be confusing to the person reading your code because they wouldn't quite know which instance they're working with at any given time, because there would be this static singleton around somewhere that does this one thing, and then you instance it for other purposes, and it's like, what is going on? And same with the engine. Just because creating a non-static engine provides you with benefits of being able to destroy the engine, create the new one, run multiple side by side, which might not ever be a requirement for the game, but if you were doing unit testing, for example, you might want to run multiple tests on multiple cores on your computer to save time. And if you weren't able to instantiate more than one on different threads, then you would run into a limitation with the code. Statics also reduce the amount of it reduces the amount of semantic value of words and a throat that won't let me speak. Static using instance classes instead of static classes makes, for example, constructors very, very important for reading code, because then you can identify the dependencies that an object has instead of that object reaching out into random bits of your program. So you get a lot more control, a lot more readability. So typically I say avoid statics. However, the fact is that passing objects around might not seem immediately obvious for people, and it might clutter the main points that I'm trying to get across. So what I said was, if you want to use a static class for the engine or the state manager, then you can, if that's what makes most sense to you. I would hope that if you do go down this road, eventually it'll become apparent why that's a bad idea. But because that's not what I'm really focusing on with what we're doing right now, it would just clutter up things for people who are having difficulty following. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
I have a C# question about switch state command. When you call return new switch state command, the next thing it will do is call savefile command.execute in state manager while loop. In other words, savefile command.execute would run, and then savefile state.render would run the next time through the while loop. Yeah. Let me go ahead and fire up that project and I'll show. When you call switch state command to the save file state, what you're doing is popping on a new state into the state manager, which is used for rendering things or rendering output. The commands are used to encapsulate what I would consider to be controller logic. So they're used to encapsulate bits of your program's functionality into reusable little nuggets that can be invoked from any state. Or even if they're not invoked from any state, they really do provide a nice separation of your code and increase readability tremendously, as you can now look down your Solution Explorer and easily identify bits of code that you care about. However, no. Where are you? You are somewhere. Here you are. So, for example, in the save state, what's going on here is that it presents a user interface to the user that allows them to switch or to select a specific file. And then it can do a variety of different things depending on what happened. So, for example, the code will detect if, well, it'll present the user with a prompt, and then it'll detect, okay, did you type in a number? If you did, that means that you're asking to save to an existing file. So then invoke the save game command with the existing file. If you did not type in a number, then and you typed in new, as you typed in 2 words with new being the first one, then return a new save game command that saves it to a new file. Otherwise, return an invalid command. And if you type in back, it'll switch it back to the last state. So then the save game command is where you would put your saving code, basically. And this is just placeholder code for the moment, but that's what you would do. And you'll notice that in my implementation, I pass in the last state of the save state into the save game command, so that the save game command can switch to the last state, to the state that invoked the save state. So let's say you're on the main menu and you go into the save state for some reason, and you do a save operation, it'll switch at the end all the way back to the main menu. If you're in a room, in your room state, and you say save, it'll go to the save state, and then once the save command happens, it'll jump back into the room state.
Nice.
Any idea how to clear the console without having to put 100 new lines? I thought cn.clear would work, but I think that just clears the buffer. Good luck with clearing the console window. I will say that system CLS is not a valid option. So, for
Did
example,
we not go into this in some detail?
we did, but I just want to point out that if you Google this and someone says, "Derp, just use system CLS," then they are wrong and shouldn't be allowed to code. This is a horrible, terrible, terrible thing that should
Say what you mean.
never, ever be invoked unless you know exactly what you're doing. Period. Security risk, performance problem, non-standard, platform-dependent, horrible code. Any idea? So if you want to clear the console, and you can stomach reading through the Win32 documentation, yes, that is also platform dependent, but it's actually more appropriate, then you're more than welcome to. However, it's not an easy task, so we are not going to really be covering it. How does split work? Well, split, this overload of split takes in a character. And what it returns, so split is a method on all strings, and it takes in a character, and it'll return an array that contains everything that's split by this character. So if I typed in the words, hey there, split would return a string array with hey and there. If I had hey pipe there, and I split on the pipe, I would also get an array saying hey there.
If you had hey there, but you split on E, what do you get back?
If you split on E, you'll get H, Y, H, Y, pipe, T, H, R. You'll get that.
Do you get an empty one at the end if the last, like there with the trailing E, do you end up with an extra
No. Nope.
empty item in your array?
Nope. Okay.
As a general thing, and I don't know if perhaps this is just my way of doing things, but like with you've got a question like that, because you actually, the actual question was quite a lot more, had a sort of more detailed description, but what you gave as a description of the problem, the questions you were asking there, if you put that into code form, you can find out the answer. You know, this is the point where I was thinking, oh, I wonder how that works. Oh, well, if I just try writing in a sentence and splitting on different and reading and
yeah.
it just, and I think doing it that way, it's better. It goes in more than someone telling you the answers, really. On this sort of thing, you can literally, set up a little test console app to, like Atomizer said, to put things together. I'm not getting at you particularly. I'm just using it to point out something that I think.
I want to point out that I did make a mistake, though. There was supposed to be a white space here, because when you split on E, it's not going to remove that white space.
Sorry, what?
I didn't have a white space right here.
What white space is it not removing?
This one. Oh, wait a sec. I was doing it based off that. Never mind. I confused myself. I was right. People in BuzzNet confusing me. Ugh. Okay. Can you give us an example of passing the engine around? Sure. So basically, you'll notice at the beginning of the program, we instantiate the engine and say run. Run instantiates the current state to be a main menu state and then enters the state machine. Main menu state gets a reference to the engine. Now, every other command that main menu state instantiates gets a reference to the engine as well. So that's an example of passing it around. Can you see my engine class? Yes, here's my engine class. That's the entirety of it. For the engine EX iGame current game, I want to get to the player.current room. Should you cast the iGame to a game to get the player.current room? Or should you have to get player's current room to the iGame interface and implement on the game class? Well, what you should really do is if the game class has an iPlayer property, then you can simply add iRoom current room to the iPlayer property. So to get the current room, so for example, I don't think I ever get the current room. Let me check. Yeah. So for example, on my start game command, I say engine begin game, game factory create game, and then engine switch state, room state, and I pass an engine game player current room. Does that make sense?
If you think about it, the best thing to own the current room is the player, because the player is always going to be in the current room that the player's in, because the current room that the player's in is the player's current room.
That hurt my head.
That worked as well. That was all right. Amazing. But you know, the point being, whereas any room might not be, most rooms will not at a given point be the current room. The player will always be in the current room. Thus, the player is the most logical thing to own current room.
Right.
Currently.
So you're passing engine around instead of the state manager. In my code, I merged the state manager into the engine. The engine became more of a class that contains the state manager and has reference to the game, which is essentially what it is. Again, the design is very, very, very fluid, and I want people to experiment with what works, and ask questions about the designs that they came up with, and then have an open dialogue in regards to that. I really would like to see that there is some differentiation between the way certain people chose to approach the problem, because we're getting into a problem, a very complex problem, well, relatively complex problem, I suppose, as far as a game is concerned. And as a result, with the more complexity a problem has, the more ways that you can use to express code to solve that problem. Yes, I didn't see player in my engine. I was using iGame. If I use game, I did see it. That's because you don't have your iGame doesn't have a property to player. You should never. I don't want to say at never ever, because there are times when it's incredibly useful and good to do this in very specific, controlled, thought-out ways. But typically, any time that you see yourself doing this, let's say, well, engine.game, anytime you see you doing this, remember that engine.game is an iGame, not a game. Oh, wait a sec.
It is now.
Is now. Anytime you see yourself doing this, that is a code smell, because you are tying your code to a specific implementation of the interface.
Say that again slowly in shorter words.
Anytime you see yourself casting an interface to the concrete type that you assume it is, you are creating a coupling between your code and a specific concrete type of interface, thus defeating the purpose for an interface. Now, there are situations where you'll be like, okay, is the object behind this interface this thing, or is it this thing, or is it that thing? And sometimes that's all right. Generally, there are tools to avoid even those scenarios, but those require a little bit additional complexity. However, doing this, having no course of action if the actual class that implements iGame isn't specifically a game class, and you have no other option, you're not using an as operator, or you have no other valid line of code, then you have a problem, most likely a big problem with your code.
So show them what it should be.
Well,
B Sharp is even helping you there.
it should be just engine.game. And if your game class has something that you want in the interface, at that point, you need to ask yourself, okay, is what I want on the game class appropriate for the iGame interface to contain? If it is, move that member up to the interface. Don't rely on the concrete implementation of game, ever, unless you know exactly what you're doing. I will do things like this. Like let's say I have an interface iStuff that has a method called things, and I have a class stuff that implements iStuff that has a things. But then it also has another method called whoa. Now here's what I might do sometimes. I might create a class, like let's call this my awesome engine, that contains a reference to the stuff class itself and instantiates it to a stuff. But when it exposes the stuff property publicly, it will expose it via the interface, which is a neat little trick that allows my awesome engine to kind of own this object instance and call what otherwise would be inaccessible. But to everybody outside this class, they are forced to communicate with our stuff in terms of this interface. So we've essentially hid this whoa method from everybody but my awesome engine.
Nice.
C#, I have an error in one of the programs we made last week in 102. Will not let me name my dictionary in my people's class people like you named it. Don't know what's different with... Ooh. See, I didn't name it people. I named it people. You catch that?
Yeah. And there's an underscore and a lowercase letter there.
See, I didn't name it people. I named it people. There's a big difference. You cannot have a member in a class that has the same name as the enclosing type. And you'll notice that's represented here in the compiler error you would get. Member names cannot be the same as their enclosing type. So you cannot have this be uppercase. Now you can make it lowercase, and that will work, because now it's no longer the same name. If you do an underscore, that will work as well, because that also makes it not the same name. So this code is not something that this is just not valid. You can't do this. Impossible. And the error message does give you a bit of a hint as to why. Let me go ahead and open up a garbage C# project. Or no, did I already do that? No, I didn't. Yeah, well, that's because your people property is not capable of being the same name as this class. See, first of all, I didn't make it a property. I made it a field, and I didn't make it public. I made it private. And as a result, the name changes were significant, because the private dictionary of int and person should be underscore lowercase p or just lowercase p. This wouldn't compile if I tried to do it. Unless I had a typo in my class. I mean, I'm pretty sure I didn't do that. Pretty sure. Been known to be wrong, but the C# compiler doesn't like me any more than it likes you, so it's not going to give me special treatment. Let's see. Come on, scroll up. What are you doing? Go away. Anyway, if I were to take this code and dump it in, you'll get that same error where you'll notice that the people dictionary can't be that name. But if I find...
I saw it there with an underscore and a lowercase. I know I did just then when you were scrolling.
Yeah, that was a different type.
Ah.
Wait a sec, what? Okay, so I see in the video where I do have P-E-O-P-L-E and P-E-O-P-L-E. Oh. You know what it probably was? The
Class, no?
Well, no, I think it was just because it didn't, I'd never built that project. And I didn't have ReSharper installed, so it wasn't, or I find that the Express edition of Visual C Sharp doesn't point out errors as quickly as my copy.
So the short version is you made a mistake.
Yeah, I'm really honestly surprised. I really thought I didn't, but like I said, I've known it to be wrong, so I did actually go and check right now, and it did have this code as Wolf has it, which wouldn't compile. But I could have sworn I compiled it. Why wouldn't I compile it? It seems stupid of me.
Yeah.
Huh.
Was it right at the end towards the end of the lesson?
It's about 216 minutes in.
Because I
It's
was
about halfway.
hammering on.
It's less than halfway. Oh, it's 96 minutes in. Sorry, 216 was the other number. Okay, so
Anyway.
Short version, I failed. This should be people repository. There you go. Code works now. And if you wanted to run it, here's what it would look like if it got ran. Wow. 2 fails in 2 different languages in 1 week.
It's impressive.
On a roll. Okay, so I apologize about that. Yes, it is. This code would be invalid if the type, if the property name is the same as a class name. And now you should never, ever, ever forget this, because you got to watch Nelson fail, and this should be ingrained into your memory from now on.
Hey, Gavin, can you do me a favor and mark off?
Oh yeah, sorry, we got out of the habit of doing that.
Okay, yeah, it's just helpful. Thanks.
Markov?
Mark off what questions have been asked over in the panel. It's a visual indicator.
Okay, I might have. Wolf says I might have fixed it. I might have. I legitimately can't remember. Okay.
I can't go any higher up the list than that because I've already deleted them off my screen.
Okay.
But those are the ones we've done.
Nelson, have you answered everything above the marks that Gavin put in?
I've been keeping track of them actually.
Okay. Okay, good.
Well, actually, there's one. Would you be better of creating a method on the interface to get the property you would need? No, I wouldn't create a method on the interface. I would create a property on the interface. See, what I have here is the engine type has a property for that game, iGame. And if I navigate into this interface, you'll notice it has a property of iPlayer. And if I navigate into player, it has a property of current room. So if I go ahead and show this in a class diagram, which I can actually do now, if I can find the button.
There it is.
So you'll notice that Let's get rid of that. That. All of... No. Oh, great. Did I just copy every single class? I don't know. I basically want to nuke all this except for engine. And then I also want to nuke everything here except for iGame, and everything here except for player. Okay, so you'll notice that the engine class has a reference to the game. The game interface has a reference to the player. Or the game interface has a reference to the player, and the player interface has a reference to the current room. So that's how the interfaces are linked together, at least as far as this model is concerned. So does that answer your question, Raymond? All right. Okay. Should load file command and start game command both be creating a new instance of game? Yes. The way I have things at least set up for right now is my load game command at the moment doesn't actually do anything. But if it were to, it would instantiate a new game, load it from a file, and then set it on the engine. Just like how my new game command, which I know I have, my start game command, which I know I have implemented, is I ask my game factory to create a game. My game factory is basically just a public class with a static method. That's all it is. It's nothing really special. It's just there because I don't want to. I want to decentralize the code that instantiates a default game. See, that's important. The way that I'm going to end up having the everything working is you'll start off with a game that's instantiated kind of statically with static code, and then when it gets saved to a file, the entire state of the game changes, or not changes, gets saved into that file. So then when you load a file, you don't start from a game that's being instantiated by the create game method. You start from all of your game objects being loaded from the binary file that represents your save state. This method has the most amount of flexibility because it allows us to change our game objects in any way, including destroying rooms, changing room connections, changing room names, and changing room descriptions. By doing it this way, we get an insane amount of flexibility, and we don't necessarily have an incredible lot of overhead as far as saving all this information, because I'm sure that the game, once created, will easily fit in under a meg. Does that make sense, Barry? Sweet. All right. So how's everyone feeling? You still with us, Jason?
Of course I am.
Are you still with us, Kevin?
I'm shiny, yes.
Yes, Shiny. Ooh, speaking of Shiny, I watched a few episodes of Firefly last week. I really need to finish the season again. I love that show.
Very cool. And it's quite awesome getting to shake hands with Adam Baldwin and talk with him. Actually,
he's a big guy now, isn't he?
I wouldn't say super big. Maybe a little, but not. He's not huge.
Well, he did Chuck in Firefly.
Do what now?
He did Chuck.
Yeah. But he's an awesome guy. Like, he was the most friendly person at the old damn convention.
That's funny, imagining Jane being friendly.
Yeah, I know. He actually beat out Tara Strong. She came in second for being most friendly.
And if you have any more questions, please chuck them in the questions panel.
Pink magical pony getting beat by a hired gun.
Yeah, isn't
As
that
far as
awesome?
friendliness.
Yep. New question.
Is there any rule to calling the switch state command? Should you always call it from state.get command? You say it's fine to call from a command.execute? I wouldn't. I wouldn't have any command instantiate another command. However, I may switch in other commands that aren't necessarily a switch state command. There's nothing. If one command needs to make a state transition, I'm not going to go through the process of instantiating a switch state command. But what I will do is I'll just tell the engine to switch the state. So, for example, in my, I believe it's my load command, or no, it's my save command, where I don't actually invoke the switch state command from here. I just literally say engine.switch state, last state. Because a command is really a unit of work. It's a block of executable code that we are, instead of putting this code inside a bunch of methods strewn about your project, because this code will have to exist somewhere. The code between these curlies right here has to exist somewhere in your project no matter what. There's no way to save a game without actually, well, saving a game. There's no way to move between rooms without moving to a different room. There's no way to print out the help or load a game or start a game without actually doing that logic. So instead of having these methods be in like a single class or a few different classes, I broke it out using a concept of a sort of unit of work or a single action that needs to be taken by the system, and abstracted these into the concept of a command and placed them in a location in my Solution Explorer that allows for easy navigation. So you can switch state from anyone that you want, from any command that you want, but I wouldn't new up a switch state command just to switch a state when you're already in a command. How can room 1 and room 2 have the same GUID? Uh-oh.
Yeah, he nailed you there.
Uh-oh. How did that happen? You didn't see that. I was working on... Thanks for catching a potential bug. I would have found it once I actually got the serialization to work, because that would have destroyed the serialization. Three errors. What other errors do I have?
I think he's keeping track of all your boo-boos today.
Yeah, it's actually been a long day. I have a horrible... it's just been... yeah. It hasn't been the best of times. Feel a bit like I might be... As far as 102, it's just try to do the code. Try to write the code in a way that makes sense to you, and then watch the videos and see if anything that I pointed out makes more sense in the context of what you tried. That's really the best way to learn design. I found the best way to learn design is when you need some sort of basis, of course, some sort of base discussion about design, about classes and interfaces. But once you get into it, start with the way that makes the most sense to you. Then read about some features or some design patterns that would facilitate doing what you're trying to do. And then it'll make it a lot simpler to see why that code is necessary and how it works.
And it kind of touches on what I was saying earlier. I think what I was getting was, find reasons to code. You were wondering about the switch, the split method, and okay, you could just highlight it, hit F1, and it will take you to it on MSDN. But it's actually far more useful to go in and play around with it, set up a little console app, and that doesn't do much, and just play around and get a feel for how to use it, what sort of things it asks for, what else it leads you towards.
Right. Create a garbage project or a garbage folder.
Yeah. And I mean, and then like we've said before, things like Project Euler, which really is a sort of maths and logic puzzles site. But the first 20 or so of those, if you treat them as programming exercises, even if you just do the first 10 or so, you will be pretty competent with parsing strings and filing out and so forth, because it's just a question of doing it again and again. And when you've got a bigger problem like this, first break it down into the small problems, and then I mean, I've found in the past it's a question of literally coding it and then hacking that code apart and doing it again, and hacking that code apart and doing it again, and just keep stirring it until it finally comes out tasting nice. Cake. It's, oh God, I mean, I spent 2 weeks doing that on something that still wasn't in good shape. This was only a couple of months ago, but it was in a lot better shape by the time I finished with it, and I'd learned a huge amount more doing it than really was required to do it because of the stages I'd gone through.
Mm-hmm.
Full stop. Sorry, I just wandered there slightly, but find excuses to code.
How many garbage projects do I have? Quite a bit, actually. 205. That's actually not that much, honestly. I've had this what, for like 6 months?
Yeah, it's not been long.
Alright, well, we're about 56 minutes into the recording, so I'm going to go ahead and hit pause and wait for a question. And we're back. Okay. Nelson, random question. How true is the statement? You can practically convert C# to Java and back with a keyword swap, ignoring some of the new C# constructs that have no Java equivalent.
That's exactly what I expected you to say, because it's a really good question.
It is.
I found, looking with a lot of the design pattern stuff is all in Java.
Yes.
And it is very easy to read as a C#,
Yeah.
if you're familiar with C#.
If you have a Java program and you can convert that Java program into C# almost just with a keyword swap and some additional things. Two Java constructs that do not exist in C# that I know of, and I'm not a Java developer, so do not quote or hold me to it, is that A, the enums we talked about previously, and B, in Java you can create anonymous classes that implement interfaces. So if I had a class like public void blah that took in an I something, I can invoke this method like this. This syntax and the a special enum syntax are the two things that I know off the top of my head you cannot take from Java to C#. That being said, from C# to Java, say goodbye to runtime generics, sophisticated reflection, properties, events, lambdas, generic type constraints, and a bunch of stuff that I'm forgetting now. Dynamic typing,
And Nelson's
implicit
love.
typing, the whole of the BCL. So
what are you trying to say here?
what I'm trying to say is that as of C# 1, C# is very similar to Java. As of C# 2, C# started drifting away from Java and adding features that Java has no equivalent of. Specifically generics. Now Java does have generics, but they do not behave the exact way that C# generics do. In Java, generics are a compile time construct that have little bearing on the runtime execution of your code, whereas in C#, generics do have implications to runtime, which allows a lot of flexibility in C#. You also, as of C# 3, you do not get generics or anonymous delegates, or sorry, you don't get lambdas and anonymous delegates. And as of C# 4, you don't get dynamic, and as of C# 5, you don't get await and async. You also don't get extension methods from C# 3. So Java is more or less C# 1.0 without properties and with rudimentary generics. So, yeah. However, that being said, if you know Java, you should be able to read most C# code. Most C# code. Now you'll still have to learn how lambdas work and how C# generics work, and how implicit typing works and extension methods and dynamic async and await and all that stuff. If you are going from C# to Java, you should have absolutely no problem reading Java code. If you can read C#, you can read Java. Someone not on 3D Buzz IRC mentioned it, and I wanted to know what you thought. Yeah, that's what I think. You can't convert between the two very easily. You can between Java and C# 1, but you can't very easily between C# 4 and Java. Okay. I, for some reason, have a save state command and no idea what the use for it is. After looking at the homework assignments, I don't see it anymore. Was it there at one point, or it still should be there? A save state command is about saving the state of the game. That's where the logic goes in to serialize the game down to a file. Now, typically, this is what my constructor looks like. I take in an engine, an iState for the last state, and a file name. And then during execution, I actually go out and save it to a file. Oh yeah, so when is Java with lambdas coming out again? Sorry, I don't mean to be mean to Java people because...
yes, you do.
Well, no, not really, because Java, it is a nice language, honestly, and it does run on a lot of platforms. The auto updater needs to go die in a fire, but other than that, it's not a terrible language, and I don't mean to be harsh on people.
Did you finish answering the question? You were halfway through then when you suddenly stopped.
Yes, the save state command really needs to have the logic for saving the game. The save game command, needs to have the logic for saving the game. The fact that it wasn't in the latest homework just means that it's not something you should modify, really. You should just place your save logic inside the execute method. That's where this logic goes. Did I answer your question, James? James Curry. Let's talk about currying in C#. Unfortunately, C# doesn't have it built-in support for currying, but I love the idea of currying. It's really fun in languages like F#. Okay. No. Out.
Okay, fine, Nelson, I'll go.
He was nudging I moved the power strip away from where he could sit on, and he was nudging it, like on purpose. Anyway, how good is Mono for writing C# cross-platform? Is it limited? I've been curious for some time. Mono is a very, very good platform. It's very robust and very, very easy to use, and very stable and very feature-rich compared to Microsoft's implementation. The tools for writing Mono software, if you're not on Windows, are a bit annoying. I personally don't like Mono developed very much, although I imagine some people do. It obviously doesn't have as many features as ReSharper does, although it's not in any ways a bad IDE. I just honestly really prefer Visual Studio. However, the libraries that you would be using cross-platform are going to be very limited. So WinForms, for example, although Mono does have a rudimentary implementation for WinForms, I found it to be very obnoxious to use, especially on Mac OS and even on Linux. It was very difficult to use. There are a few other cross-platform GUI toolkits that you can use. There's an LVVM wrapper around Qt that I actually never got to work. And obviously there's going to be C bindings for stuff like WX widgets and so on. It depends on what you're going for. If you're going for writing a game in C++ and you want to provide mono as an embedded runtime, that's actually incredibly easy to do. So if you were to write an application in C++ and wanted to use C# for extensibility, game logic, or application logic, that's really, the process is very straightforward. There's a few API calls that you need to run. Obviously, you'll need to link against the mono library and include a mono runtime. But I found that to be a very easy experience and pretty cool as well. Quick question, is there a nice 3D API for C# other than with X and A? No. No. I mean, you could say Unity is a 3D API for C#, but it's obviously it's an application.
A bit of Unity is.
So X and A is the way to go. If you want 3D graphics in C#, yeah. Yeah, there's not many other options. I suppose you can use ComInterop to interact with DirectX directly, but that'll be even more awkward than interacting with DirectX directly from C++, which is very awkward to say the least. I didn't finish typing all the code for the base code for the Homer program yet, but before I even really start the Homer, but I'm getting an error that I don't get why. It says, can convert uint to target type int. This is for health, where health equals reader.uint32. Oh, well, that's...
I already answered that.
Oh.
Do you not see my answer?
No. Let me expand my window. Oh, there we go. Yeah, you want to use int32, not uint32.
I wasn't sure whether you actually got to see what I answered or just that I had answered it.
I didn't get to see any of it. I had the window collapsed, so I could only see the ask question.
Yeah.
Can't do it implicitly. No, you cannot.
Can it? Oh, no. Well, can it do it the other way around implicitly?
Yes.
Because there's no reason why it shouldn't. Cause...
Right. A binary reader.
Although.
Keep in mind, though, of course, you can do local variables implicitly. So I can say var number equals br.read int32, but I can't go the other way around. And if you're not using local variables, then there's no way that you can do this. So there's no way to say... That's the only way that you can type that code out. There's no alternative. But for a binary writer, and of course that's because C# does not support overloading based off return values or return types. If C# did support overloading based off return types, then theoretically you could have multiple implementations of read, and then the compiler would choose it based off what it's being assigned to. But the writer does have overloads for every type, meaning I can do person.age and it'll correctly choose the int overload. No, British are coming? I don't get it.
No, I don't. I mean, you know, we've invaded most people over at some point in time, so we could be coming back. I thought somebody pointed that out as a good slogan for the British Tourist Board. Come and visit us, or we'll come and visit you again.
Okay, so how's everybody feeling?
You seem to be teaching too well. We've run out of questions again, so...
Yeah, well, at least I haven't messed up again. Cricket. Cricket.
I guess we better wrap things up if there's no more questions.
You asked me a question, but I didn't want to answer it. You're Curry, right? Yeah, I did. Did I answer that question? I thought I did.
I don't know. What was the question?
It's been marked as answered.
Oh, no, he's just messing with me, apparently. I feel like I should ask something about C# homework, but I don't know what to ask.
That's just beautiful.
I don't know. No, my dog's name is not Spike. I should change it to Dashy or something, though. That'd be funny. He's actually not my dog, though, although he is here all the time at my desk and in my car when I leave. And, yeah.
He rides with you everywhere?
Yeah, anytime. He knows I go to Starbucks in the morning. And so in the morning, like when he sees me get up, he'll just get all like super excited. I open up the front door and he'll just bolt out next to my car door.
So you're kind of like a male version of Paris Hilton. Always have your dog with you.
Well, I can. I can't put him in the back.
Thanks for that image.
You're welcome.
Did you see Florin's question?
Yeah.
Just chose to ignore it.
No.
Yeah.
No. That's something I want to end the video with. So I was just finishing the random pointless conversation we had to see if any more questions would come in. No, we'll get to that. I just want that to be like the last thing that we do. Maybe we can go over the homework again. Well, the homework should have been hopefully self-explanatory, but I did, I did encourage anybody who didn't quite understand it to ask about it. So I hope everybody did get the opportunity to read it, read the prompt before today, hopefully, because, well, today's where you ask questions. Because, yeah, the week 2 homework prompt wasn't the best written thing I've made. Okay, yeah, let's go ahead and jump over to Florin then. Where's Florin? Florin. Presenter.
Hi.
Hey.
Hello.
Which one do I give? Jason?
I don't know which Jason I am.
Neither do I.
Oh.
The last one?
I don't know what.
Try it.
Just try it.
Does it work?
Nope, wrong Jason. Oh, no, did it move? Or no, that was you moving it.
That's him.
No, me. Does it work now?
I think so, but it's very, very laggy.
Oh.
Alrighty.
What, Nels? The first thing you do is you just like cover up part of his buzznet. He had his layout all nice and neat.
Now, let me...
I'm trying to read the code.
I know. I'm just giving you a hard time.
Okay. Yeah.
I wanted opinions about the extern. I didn't use extern before, so did I implement it correctly? The headers.
Well, with the methods, methods don't need the extern modifier. Although it'll work, they don't need it. The only thing that needs the extern modifier are variables.
Oh, like you did with the const to int to and stuff like that. When you did the array thing.
Yeah. So that this would work, although this does work, it would also work if it was just a function prototype, which is just that bit.
Mm-hmm.
But no, as far as separation, that looks... Oh, come on. This is a sick joke. There you go. Yeah. I mean, this is kind of what I was going for as far as the homework prompt. I really wanted basically people to create the header files and the CPP files so it kind of looked like they were object-oriented, because then it'll make talking about object orientation a bit easier. Because this is how you would do it in C, for example. You'd be stuck doing it like this. And then now that, people... I really wanted to see people kind of do it like this so that it would make the discussion about object orientation easier.
Well, yeah, it's always easy to explain why something's good if you've tried it the bad way.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I did it the bad way for a long time.
Or even it's good to see why something's better, easier, more convenient.
Yeah.
You only really get an appreciation of that having done it the long way, the slow way, the old-fashioned way, because otherwise you just come to it fresh and you don't. It all just, you don't realise how much is being done for you or why, what the reason is. Somebody help me out of this sentence.
Here, have some words. Word.
Yeah, thank you.
So, sweet. Oh, this is going to take a while.
No, just for products. Please don't break it.
Oh, you've got video evidence that you had it working at one point.
That's right.
Yeah, sweet. So then that should fail. Or, well, that's an input problem. That should fail. Or no, never mind. I'm leaning so close into my monitor right now. I can see the individual pixels.
Certainly enough I am.
Well...
Oh, wrong button. But no, yeah, that's...
I won't change it. Leave it like that.
Yeah, that's definitely cool. The only thing is that the externs are extraneous. The same thing would have happened if these weren't extern.
Are they like old auto? Like the old auto was in C++? For function? Or,
The autos?
Yes, the autos. When you placed autos, they were largely ignored.
Well,
so I'm thinking...
Yeah, autos do... they're not needed, but they do save a little bit of typing. This is just more typing where a function prototype would have done the same thing. Although this is also useful when you're talking about static libraries and DLLs. So extern is sometimes required for functions, but not in this case. Mm-hmm. It depends on if you're talking about a DLL or a .lib file.
Yes, I understand.
All right, sweet.
Thanks for the input and for the time.
Sweet.
How do I...
Hold on, let's hope.
Nelson will grab that.
Hope I clicked on the right Jason. Yep. For some reason, whenever I see both of us in there in the same name, Jason, I get reminded of that, what is that scene in Season 2, Episode 2, where Twilight was forced Spike to impersonate Rainbow Dash?
Oh, yeah.
You're the new Rainbow Dash. Let's go. Okay, so could you go over how you would handle the header files for C++ homework that was due today? I found it very difficult. I didn't do it like this guy did. I didn't have a header for each CPP file. Well, basically, typically, you do it like what Florin had for every C++ file that has a function that you want to be accessible elsewhere. So you'll almost always want a C++ a .h file to correspond to a C++ file. You'll never, I mean, not never. There are times when you don't need, like for main, for example. Main doesn't need a main.h because main isn't exporting anything. It's not making any of its functions available to anybody else. But for example, like you saw with the Florin's code, where he would have a function function prototype, and then in the CPP file, it would be followed by an implementation. So by placing that prototype in the .h file, you allow other CPP files to access that. You were told in the IRC that that was madness? Yeah, I didn't actually get to see that entire conversation because Mr. Charisma kicked me. So I can't... yeah, he just kicked me while I was playing a video game. He just kicked me. I don't know. And then I was like, whatever. I'll join in later. But then I never got to see that thing.
See what thing?
The conversation he had with Wolf before I joined back in and told Mr. Charisma what I thought about what he said before he kicked me. Okay.
Did you catch Chris's question in there?
You mean, or Chris's? Oh, that Chris. When you start a new game, should we create the rooms, players, etc. from a file or for a set of static data? Either or both, or depending. When you create a new game, that should all come out of static code like this. Especially considering the way that the project is going to be going, given the... I've been talking to Zach about the storyline, the features I want to implement and all that stuff. I'm pretty much probably not going to provide a file format to read in a game. The game is going to be hard-coded instantiations of objects, and then it's going to be set up like this. However, this is only for a new game. A load game doesn't even touch this code. A load game just loads all the game objects in from a file in the state that they were when the game was saved.
I think you should do it the way I did for Hyperion. I literally, every time, I basically made a copy of all the key presses, and that was the save game file. And when it loaded a game, it just played the game. They were tilde-separated values, and it just played the game.
That's actually
Well, hey,
clever.
I hadn't been taught how to do it, so but I knew some filing out, so I thought, well, there we go. I can make it play the game. Because it's all that stuff about what state are the rooms in, what has been picked up from a room, what's been put down somewhere else. I'll just do it again.
Wolf asks, do we need to put all the classes into their own CS files? This is a convention that I would really like people to follow, period.
Yes, you do.
So yes, you do. I will break that convention for demonstration and example purposes, but you do really want to place everything in their own CS files.
Because that way you get, like we said before, the three-dimensional bonus of being able to look at the Solution Explorer and see what is in your... Otherwise, you're just going to have one CS file called code. And that just shows you that you've got some code. Whereas you can look at... Yeah, exactly. You can look at this solution here and you see, right, okay, well, I've got some abstracts. We've got commands, we've got gameplay commands, non-gameplay commands, and some other commands. We've got some states, we've got some value objects.
Yeah, and
then we've got the main things that are used are all down. And yeah, I was just because they were closed up. But yeah, you can see the shape of the program. I find A4 paper, marker pens, and lots of arrows and circles and squiggly lines very helpful with that.
Wait a second, are we talking about C# or C++? Because he said I was first trying to do it like that, but then it got all tangled in my mind and in the linker. C++ or C# doesn't have a linker. Or it doesn't, well, I mean, it does that thing with the
You don't
linker
interact
does, but
with
it doesn't. Yeah, it's not a separate compilation phase. It's actually built into the compilation phase where the compiler itself does multiple passes over your code, collects information, and then reconciles that information for you, as opposed to the C++ way, which the preprocessor does its thing, the compiler does its thing, and then the linker does its thing. With C, with C++ code, you should definitely break. Not every in C++ code, you should always break your classes up into separate header and CPP files. You don't necessarily need to break your functions into separate CPP files and CS or header files, because generally you'll group together the functions that a particular CPP file has and set it up in the header files as prototypes. So something like, I think this is my C++ project. Yep. Something like this, you would say, okay, I want a bunch of functions that have to do with products. So I'm going to call, or let's just say file input or console input. So I'm going to create an input.cpp file, and I'm going to say string get string.
By the way, you're still doing a system CLS on the main. There's no E in awful.
Okay, so you might have a string get string method and an int get int method. Maybe these take in prompts as well. And so on. And then if you want to, so you'll place groups of related functions into their own CPP files. And then if you want to export these functions for use elsewhere, you'll want to create a corresponding header file. By creating a header file that corresponds directly with the name of the CPP file. And if somebody told you that this wasn't the right way to do it, then I don't know. Then that means that every bit of code that I've ever written in regards to C++ or ever read in regards to C++ was also incorrect, including C. All the C code I've ever written or wrote was incorrect, apparently, if this is not how you're supposed to do it.
You're going to be in IRC 3 seconds after this ends, aren't you, saying, who told him not to do that?
Yeah, we can go ahead and jump over to your screen. Although somebody did toss me in a GitHub link. Was that for me just to look at, or did you have any specific questions about it? Because it looks about right, just off a glance. Okay, yeah, Wolf, do you have the code up? Because I'm curious as to what those people led you to do if this isn't how you're supposed to do it.
And just to answer one of your other questions, how many rooms do you need to make? How many rooms do you want?
We will be providing...
It's your game.
Yeah, we will be providing a story and data and implementation for a specific game that's being designed by Zach for people who, well, don't want to create a game like that. Just to have, to keep things going, and that's what I'm going to be using for all my examples and demonstrations, but you're free to create your own if you wanted to. And then we'll be making that entire project available to people in some format or other. But, hey, what's up?
Hey, did Gavin answer my question or somebody else? It cut out when it was switching to me.
Yeah, yours. You asked how many rooms you need to make. It's up to you. That's what Nelson was just finishing asking as well. It depends on how many rooms you want, really. For testing purposes, in terms of have I linked rooms together properly, then, well, 2 would be a minimum because you need 2 rooms to link them together. but really, how many rooms you make really comes down to how many rooms you want for your game. It's not a set thing, really.
Right, but right now you only have to do 2, but later you can add rooms as you add, make a game.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So this is what I have all of these functions in their own CPP file, and then the headers. I just have these, and let's see. It's like I collected some of the function forward. What am I trying to say? What's that?
I'm not. What's choice? I'm confused.
Oh, well, I mean, these are, each one of these is a function. So what is it called? The forward something?
The prototype.
Okay.
I would
Forward prototype.
I would place all of those choice methods or choice functions. Well, I would probably rename them. Instead of choice 1, I would do something like that makes sense as far as what the choice actually does or represents. And then I would combine all of those in the same CPP file. Was that something that people were telling you not to do?
No, they wouldn't tell me not to do that. I thought we were, like, at first I was coming in, I thought we were supposed to have each function in its own file, and then a corresponding just like bubble sort here, and then bubble sort dot h for each and every one of them. And they said that was madness.
No, that would be madness.
Well, yeah, for every single function. But what you can do is you can group together related functions. Like, I would say the choice 1 through 4 and the choice options, given that, changing the name would be really good.
Yeah, I know, I'm bad at that.
But
does choice options go with display options, or?
Where? No, they're different. Choice. It's this is just the loop that goes through, and if you choose the different ones, then you go, okay, you made choice, you chose 1 and then you go to choice 1, and that implements what you do. It's just because it's too big otherwise.
Yeah, what I would do is I would take all of the rename all the choice functions themselves. I mean, they're fine. It's great that they are their own functions, but they really do need better names. And then group all the choices into one CPP file, and then I would group choose options and display options and into their own CPP files as well, or into a coalesce CPP file. Gavin?
Could you just open one of the other numbered choice files, please? Thank you. Yeah, I think you'd probably really be better off with a choice method that takes in the number of the choice as a parameter. Because if you compare that and choice 1 and presumably choice 3 and choice 4, they're all the same code,
right,
with the exception of the number of the index.
Yeah, I would. If you make one choice function, then you could have a parameter into it called like a product index, and then you can group all of those functions into one function. Because the only thing that changes is line 11, 12, and 12.
Well, it's the index. That's the only.
Yeah.
Yeah. And not line 9, obviously.
Yeah, I was trying to do .h for each and every one of these, but is getting really confusing on how to
Yes.
incorporate that to where
Do you
you
want to
don't have
just
that
run
linker.
in? Do you want to just run in through refactoring those choice methods as an example of what? Because I think it might give you an idea of the sort of thinking behind what to put in what place as well.
Before we do that, if we do that, can I show you the different H's that I did? Header files. The H's.
Yeah.
So I tried to group them so that you wouldn't necessarily need all of them, but no, not really.
Well, yeah, if you extend your grouping from your H files and extend it to your CPP files, to where basically for every H file that you have already, create a corresponding CPP file and group together everything into one CPP file per H file, except for main, of course, because that doesn't need an H file. That would be a better way to do this, because having multiple functions in one CPP file is acceptable. It's just like having multiple methods in one class is acceptable. However, once we get into object-oriented programming, you typically want one class per .h and .cpp pair. But that class will contain a bunch of methods, just like how having multiple methods in one CPP file is acceptable.
I also just created this data one for all the global variables I have here.
Yeah, then people can access that from there. But
And then the data CPU.
yeah, that's what you would do for variables like or globals like that. You would have a CPP file that corresponds to the H file.
But this is just, so that a lot of things, have data.
Yeah.
So, but it's like, that's the way you have it, right? You wouldn't have. I don't know. Is that giving me a linker? You have one data file instead of having, a bunch of, all these different headers having those global information as well. For what I'm saying is, you should have multiple headers in a lot of these, shouldn't you?
Generally speaking, one header should correspond to one CPP file. Generally speaking. So, for example, what you could do is you can make one choices.cpp and then copy all your choice functions into that one CPP. You could make one, like maybe a display.h or display.cpp, and then bring everything that you define in your display.h into that one CPP file. So then you'll have so right now you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 headers. You should have 6 CPP files. One for main, and then 5 more that correspond to each .h. And then define every function in the corresponding CPP file.
Well, how would you handle these globals?
Just like how you did.
Then, just like
yeah. So you have data.
So you'd have 6. You'd have 6 header files, as well as 6.
1, 2, 3, 4. No, how many header files do you have? 1, 2, 3, 4.
We have 5.
Yeah, so the header files are fine as they are, is what I'm saying.
But I'm saying you said that you'd have one more CPP file. And,
Yeah, it'd be the main CPP file.
But wouldn't data make that even?
Well, no, because you've got a data CPP file.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And you would want to keep
So you'll have the main.cpp file, and then what you need to do is go through and rationalize your CPP, the rest of your CPP files, into one or other of those 5 topic headings, for one of the better, bubble sort, choices, data display, or whatever the other one is. I can't see from here. Process setup. So obviously you've got the bubble sort that's paired up. All of your, well, like I said, that's one. You need to refactor the choice CPPs, all those choice methods into one with a parameter, but those will all be related. will all go in a choices.cpp along with the choose options.
So
The
is this
data
how,
already matches up. The display will obviously take in the display options and anything else related to that, and the setup will do all the setup ones: the set money, set product name, set product price, and setup.
right? So it would look similar to this, just having one implementation, or not implementation, I guess, forward.
Yeah, the bubble sort.cpp will remain the same because you only have one function in the header file and one function in the CPP file, but the choices will change. So you won't have a choice 1 through 4 CPP file, you'll have a choices.cpp file with the choice 1 through choice 4 functions inside of the same file.
Oh yeah, and like, okay, I see what I mean, Gav is saying that,
Yeah.
some you'll have a few on those, but they'll all be in the same
Yep.
CPP file. So, what? Wait a minute.
And the breakdown you've made of the header files makes sense, you see. It does. I mean, there's nothing wrong at all with that.
Yeah.
In terms of how you've broken it down. It's just a question of now.
Change to the CPP.
Yeah, I mean, the process setup one, for instance. If you create a process setup.cpp file, and then literally take all of the functions out of the other setup methods, cut them out and put them into it, and then just nuke the remaining emptiness that you no longer need. It's literally, I mean, like assuming no other problems, you don't need to change any of what they do or anything like that for those. It's just a question of put them all in the one CPP file that has got the same name as the H file that goes with it.
And you said that the CPP file should not have more than one includes, but what about data? Shouldn't some of them need data?
I don't
Because
think you
that's where
said
the
that
globals are.
at any point. Nelson, are you still there?
Did you say
Saying
that?
not?
No, data.h is fine. As far as your includes, though, you can have as many includes in the CPP file as you want. And when I say that, I mean like lines 1 through 3. Those are all includes.
Right.
You're not restricted in how many you have.
Oh, okay. I thought you had said I should only include the corresponding
You should
header
you should
file.
always include the corresponding header file, but then you can include
Not
other header
just.
files.
Okay. All right. So would this? I mean, this code works. Is this passing or is this failure? Because I mean, the homework was already due. I turned it in.
It looks like it works. I would still probably worry about factoring the choice functions into one, but other than that, it's up to Gavin.
Yeah, I mean, see, the approach we tend to take with this is that, it's not a question of trying to find reasons to fail, pick holes in you. It's really for the sort of, I've told you now the sort of things that you will get back from this in terms of the notes, which is that really those choice methods should all be one method that's parameterized, and your files should match up. But it's all the stuff that we've been through now. So I mean, you don't need to panic from that point of view. It's far more important that you actually understand what we've said and why it is the case, so that next week, because that's the other thing with the structure of these classes, because they build week to week, both of them on the previous week's work. In a funny sort of way, if you manage to do this week's right, that's indicative of whatever happened last week, you now know how to do it, and similarly, the following weeks is indicative of where you're up to on this. So it's not a question of that.
No, yeah. No,
Short answer: don't panic about resubmitting it.
Cool. Yeah, no, I understand. That makes a lot more sense now because I was really confused on how to do this. I was really misinterpreting because I thought
But of course,
everything.
next week I would, if next week is based on the same, which I think it is, I get slightly confused as to which week is what with the longer homework period. But obviously, I would expect then to see one choice with a parameter that you can
Yes.
pass in, and everything. The stuff we've been through now. You do need to consider for future weeks,
Right.
really, because we've been through it, and.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
I feel good about it. All right. Thanks.
All right. Who am I? I am this person. Alrighty. So we're getting close to going away now.
Jonathan, is there anything in particular in your code that you're having problems with? Just mess. Yeah, I have that problem.
What happened to the game file persistence we did in C# class? Did you split the classes in the save game command, load game command? Oh, I would have if I had incorporated that code into what I have so far. I am going to be the features and story are going to be complete tomorrow, so I'll have an implementation for tomorrow's class that is full. Previously, what I've been doing is I've been pretty much set on the same architecture since we started the entire course, but I've been working on the features that I wanted to discuss outside of the context of that project so that I can introduce them without having all that baggage, and then when we introduce it, having the homework be incorporating what we learned about, file persistence and stuff like that into the existing code that you put together. So that was kind of the way that I was envisioning things to go.
And did you see what Afix asked in BuzzNet?
Afix.
Do we have to use array pointers?
Do we have to use array
In week
pointers for functions? Not necessarily. You can make global arrays. I did see that Florum did actually use arrays in function parameters, which are just an alias for pointers. If you get that to work, then that's great, and you can use it. But you don't need to. You could use external global variables. And then once we talk about pointers next week, then we will finally be getting into some really fun stuff that we can do with C++. And once we start talking about pointers, I'm going to start being a lot pickier with design, because once we start talking about pointers, we should be able to get rid of all of our global variables. And then once we start talking about object-oriented programming, we should be able to get rid of all of our global functions, which is super exciting.
Apart from main. Apart from main.
Yeah, apart from main.
I'll tell you what, have you actually done, which was bubble sort for? Was that C# or C++? C++ must be. Have you actually been through it in C++ on video yet?
No, I think everybody's more or less got it, though. Because I
We've
did.
got a few people asking about it, that's why I brought it up.
I did the pseudocode for it. Remember how I did the diagram of it?
Just chuck up the code for it and walk people through it, because that was from a few weeks back now, and it is still, people still asking questions about it.
Fine. Trying to get me to write code.
Well, it'll take you about 3.5 seconds to write the code.
Remember, this is C++, never sharper.
7 seconds. And Florence. And when that is done, you should get rid of 2/3 of the ascendants.
really? Oh, right, derp. Okay, so if I wanted to sort these guys, what I could do is simply do for, or actually while, or bool exit equals false while exit, and I meant while not exit. I'll say exit equals true, for int I equals 0, I smaller than 10, I plus plus. I can go ahead and say product left equals products at I. And note, I want actually smaller than 9. And then I'll do product right equals products I plus 1. Then I'll say if left.price is greater than right.price, then swap them. So products I becomes right, and products right becomes left, and exit becomes false. So now I can go ahead and say for int I equals 0, I smaller than 10, I plus plus. And watch this fail. Oh, right. Wait, what?
Ignore? Did you do the ignore?
Ignore shouldn't matter in this case because I'm not doing any input. Is 41, product 0. Wow, my string stream isn't working right.
Did you miss a new line?
There we go. So product 0 is 41, product 2 is... And every time I run this, of course, I need to do... Oh, I forgot that stupid method. I don't care. So now you'll see it sorts it in proper order, and you'll notice we start at 0, or we have 0, 1, 2, and they're all... These numbers are not in order because we swapped out everything and made it into ascending order of price.
Yeah, the product IDs are the order they were created in.
Yeah. See, if we did this before looping, it'd look like this.
Cool. That's really all there is to it. You go through one fewer times than there are items in your list. You grab that item and the next item, compare the prices, and then swap them if necessary.
Yep. How can we convert this bubble sort to a method? If you have products, if you, for example, have a, if you have something like this, So if you had a header file like this, then the corresponding CPP file could look like this. And of course I need to include string using std string. Now I can say include products.h, and then I can say namespace void add product. Actually, I'm going to make a vector of products.
Just use dot sort.
Yeah.
Is there a dot sort on vector?
No, but there is a sort method in the algorithms header, if I'm not mistaken.
And this is exactly the sort of process, Wolf, that you could go through with refactoring your files out that we were talking about earlier. As you can see, it's basically a lot of copying and pasting, or rather cutting and pasting.
Yep. So then after doing that, main simply becomes this. So, and then of course, we run into a bunch of compilation errors.
Did you need S stream in the other file?
I don't know. Here, just give me 1 second to find something that I don't know where it is. Okay, so it's just because obviously we have a syntax error right there. And then I meant to get a runtime exception. Sorry, somebody walked into the room. So we get an exception. We get an exception because... What was the exception we got anyway? There we go. Vector subscript out of range. Line... So...
Oh, you replaced your 9 with dot count, and it should be dot
right.
count minus
Yeah,
1?
Yep.
Boom!
Okay. So yes, that's how you do it.
No, Florum, that won't do as an excuse. Do you want to point out that what the source of that error was a bit more clearly?
Yeah, because notice line 24, I do products at I+1. If products is the size of the vector, that's going to be one element after the vector. Instead of giving me a nice little message, it gives me this exception vector subscript out of range. And then if I hit retry to go into debug mode, we get some nice, really clean, very sensible code. But of course, we can go back, jump back to the call stack and find, wait a sec, this is happening right here. I is equal to 9, whereas products only has 10 items in it. And so I+1 is 10, therefore it's an out of range. Anyway, so this is how you would break the bubble sort into its own function.
And yeah, vectors were only covered this week, but the first version he showed didn't use vectors, it used the array method. So that would have worked for any of the preceding week's homeworks.
Yep.
shuffled out of the way.
All right. So is there anything else to add? It's been going for a good while now.
Yeah, it must be coming up on 2 hours.
We've had 2 hours of recording. Your swap implementation, Jonathan, works just fine. Of course, I'm probably, yes, it is non-generic. You could have used templates with it, but obviously, because we haven't covered references yet, that's not going to be applicable to anything. But yeah, that swapped implementation it works just fine. A genericized version of the swap operation would be better, of course, but I think you kind of mentioned that because you said it was a non-generic. But that implementation is fine.
Cool. So things seem to have dried up. That was basically, we had those two last groups of questions that were about the same few things. Unless there's anything much more, we should probably look at wrapping this up, I guess, in a minute.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
I sensed your presence. Like Darth Vader at Christmas. Oh, I felt your presence. Sorry. It's getting early.
Yeah, no, exactly. Now we can go ahead and wrap things up here.
Okay. Well, I guess I will see some of you tomorrow, and I'll see some more of you Friday, and I'll see some more of you Monday. So, yeah.
So you guys all have a wonderful night. For those of you that we're not going to see until next week, have an awesome weekend as well.
All right.
Bye, guys.
See ya.
Bye, everyone.